Hello everyone, my name's Naomi,
And my name's Kaylee.
and this is the Eerie Theories podcast.
We're going to talk about true crime, conspiracies, ghosts, and other strange and eerie topics.
Some of this may be NSFW or triggering since some of our topics can be unsettling or violent. We recommend listening with caution.
Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the show. And I like that we ended up coordinating and matching without trying.
I know, we didn't even try.
And it's like 86 degrees out.
You know,
We're like pretending it's fall.
it's close enough. Like we've got candles going, Christmas candles. We're good. But yeah, that's
Okay.
wild.
I'm like so excited because I don't know even what this company does.
Yeah, I'm like I wanted you to know nothing about it at all. I'm really glad that you've never heard of it.
I'm excited.
Like, I have so much information. I watched so many things. I read so many things about it, and like, yes, get ready because it's a big one. So, again, before we get started, this one, since I read so many different sources and everything about it, and everything, I didn't make it into like a chronological timeline. I made it into like sections of the company.
Okay.
And so it's not in any timeline order.
Okay.
And it's not really important, the timelines. I'll tell you important dates, but other than that, like the only reason dates are important is to know like how much the company was worth during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And even then I had conflicting reports on that. So I was like, I guess I don't have to do it like exactly chronologically.
Okay.
So what we're talking about today is a company called Theranos and its founder and creator, Elizabeth Ann Holmes. So Elizabeth was born in February 3rd, 1984. Her family had come from a legacy of success. Her dad's name was Christian Holmes, and his family had founded the Flyman Yeast Company.
Like yeast as
like
in like
bread.
bread? Okay.
Yeah, like, you know, the epitome of let's get this bread, you know?
Well, I mean, it was only either that or like monostat, so...
Yeah, true. Yeah, but yeah, they actually got like really, really wealthy from this. They became one of the wealthiest families in America during the 20th century. So it like really skyrocketed them into success. And a little side note about the company and its founder, he helped found the New Yorker, the magazine as well. And he had a 42-room mansion, 40 servants, and bought Coconut Island. So, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so he comes from money. But throughout the generations, the fortune dwindled, and it ended up not being really anything for Christian and his family. So they did acquire success, but at the moment they weren't wildly successful like they used to be. So not only that, but her great-great-grandfather on her dad's side had established the Cincinnati General Hospital, as well as the University of Cincinnati's medical school. So like they started a lot of things in America. And then on her mother's side, her mother was named Noelle Holmes, and her father was a high-ranking official at the Pentagon.
Okay.
So just like...
They were all over the place.
Yeah. And Elizabeth grew up in Washington, D.C. Her dad had various government jobs, and her mom worked on Capitol Hill, but when the two kids were born, she had a brother. She became a housewife. But either way, they were all very successful. And coming from a family like this, you can see that there's like a lot of desire to continue on with success. So just like most kids, she was asked what she wanted to be when she grew up, and she responded, "I want to be a billionaire."
That is a good prospect.
Right? She was 9 years old when she was asked this, and she was like, billionaire. And I'm like, I don't think I even knew what billionaire like meant. Like, I didn't know that was a number. Like, but yeah, she knew what she wanted. But yeah, she was gifted while growing up. She was a straight A student, and she attended St. John's High School, which is a prestigious high school. I believe it's in Texas.
Okay.
So, yeah. But yeah, and right off the bat, she knew that she wanted to go to Stanford. Because that's a school that's well known for science, technology, and business. Stanford's also commonly linked with Silicon Valley because it's in the same area and everything like that. And I'm assuming everyone knows what Silicon Valley is, but if not, it's an area in San Francisco that is considered to be America's technology hub. And Silicon Valley has companies like Yahoo, Google, and
Apple.
Yeah, everything. Amazon, everything. But Yahoo and Google were created by Stanford grads. I didn't know that. But yeah. And so it's like an obvious choice for her. She was also interested in all these fields. Yeah, that was the perfect college for her. She wanted to be an entrepreneur, but she also loved science and technology, and so perfect fit. So she got started early. Her father would go on to China to do a lot of business trips. So he decided that it would be best to teach his children Mandarin. And like, I kind of wish like my parents had done that. Like,
That's
why
awesome.
don't I know like so many languages? I wish.
And like the two hardest ones.
Yeah. I'm like, Mandarin I've heard is very, very difficult. And so, yeah. But this actually gave her an edge learning Mandarin because midway through her high school career, she managed to talk her way into Stanford's Mandarin summer program.
Oh.
So, and this program was only allowed for college students, but because she was so fluent, she was very well educated, this gave her an edge to go into the Mandarin summer program at Stanford, and this program was only allowed to college students. So she really, really impressed her professors with how fluent she was, with how smart she was, with how rich she was, you know. So, yeah, she got in, and it made it even easier for her to be accepted into Stanford. And in 2002, she was accepted as a President's Scholar, which was a $3,000 grant that was given to exceptional students. Elizabeth was interested in technology and everything like that, but her father, all her life, had aided in humanitarian efforts. And so that instilled in her that she has to work towards the greater good, not just for money.
Okay.
And so with biotech, she could do both, she found out. So she majored in chemical engineering, which is it works really well with biotech. And while she was in school, she took an intro to chemical engineering class with the Associate Dean of Stanford. He was the Associate Dean of Stanford School of Engineering. So he was like very specifically with engineering, and he was very well known and renowned. And his name is Channing Robinson. And she got close to this professor, and he saw a lot of potential in her. So during winter break of her freshman year, she started talking about dropping out. And like most parents would react, they instead were like, having a PhD and stuff. And so she actually responded, "No, Dad, I'm not interested in getting a PhD. I want to make money." So, like, she knows what she wants.
That's fair.
I guess, yeah. Like, if I was that smart, I guess you know what it leads to. But yeah, she ended up going back to school. And she interned at the Genome Institute of Singapore. And in 2003, the area had been greatly affected by a severe acute respiratory syndrome named SARS. And so she helped out with the testing and everything, and she was introduced to the world of nasal swabs and syringes and just the clinical setting in general. And there she thought there must be a better way to do this. So she goes back home and writes a patent for an invention. She wants to make a patch that goes on your skin, and it has microneedles on it that will take your blood, and from that would diagnose and treat medical conditions for you.
Interesting.
Yes.
It's like a good caffeine patch.
Right? It's like, it's very... I would have never thought of anything like that. Like, yeah, but she did, and she wrote a patent for it, and she showed a few people, and some were very skeptical because it does border on science fiction. But her professor, Mr. Robinson, he was really impressed, and he told her to follow her dreams. So, I mean, that's a good teacher, I guess. I don't know. Like, it sounds nice, but yeah.
That's really cool, though. Like, if you could get it to work, but you would have to have, like, so much technology just within that little patch.
Exactly.
To be able to test the blood work.
And with, like, how small she's trying to get it to be, like, a patch is, like,
a
patch, you know? Like, it's not, like, a machine.
Like a little 2-inch by 2-inch square.
Yeah. And, like, it has to be very thin as well. So...
And it can't be uncomfortable.
Because it has to...
Yeah.
And also it has to stay on for extended periods of time.
Well, and with how they test blood anyway, like, how they will sometimes do, like, different chemicals to see how it reacts to see what's in your blood.
Exactly.
Like, are they just gonna put all those in the patches? Like,
exactly.
Sitting on you?
Exactly. And so... It was a lot. But either way, she, the following fall, she dropped out. So she was like, I'm going to do this, like, you know,
nice.
Like every other CEO of every company. So she did it. And Elizabeth decides to start a company. And this company was called Real Time Cures. But something that, like, they misspelled the company name on a few of the paychecks, and so for a few weeks the paychecks stated that the company name was Real Time Curses.
Oh no.
So foreshadowing for you a little bit. But yeah, eventually
a witch totally cursed those paychecks.
Honestly,
that's exactly what happened.
Exactly. But eventually they changed the name to Theranos.
Okay.
And this is a combination of therapy and diagnosis. And so a fellow student that worked with her in labs, Shaunak Roy, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name, he became her first employee. He also went to Stanford and everything and knew Mr. Robinson and all that. So, like every company, especially a medical technology company, she needed money. And so she gathers up a few connections. Some are her friends' parents, and others are family friends. And they ended up investing in the company. And some of the connections were actually really impressive. One was Tim Draper. He was a very well-known venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. So he was a really big name to be able to get to go onto this startup that no one had heard of, very few employees are a part of. And Victor Palmineri, And he was a friend of her father's that worked in the government and also made a large investment towards the company. So she starts the work on her patch, and she calls it the TheraPatch. And it was meant to, once again, take blood, analyze it, and make decisions on how much of a drug could be administered. So, again, very smart technology for a little patch. She pitched the idea to MedVenture, a venture capital that specializes in medical tech investments. And they ended up making her a little flustered. They asked a few questions that Elizabeth could not answer. And like I said, the patch was pretty much science fiction. Mm-hmm. They couldn't really believe that something like that could just come out of thin air.
Yeah.
And so they, Elizabeth and her team decided to try and settle on maybe the patch can just diagnose. That's it. But even that was really hard because, like you said, there's a lot of science that has to go into diagnosis, and so a little patch couldn't really do it. Mm-hmm. And so they decided to make a patch that was similar to a blood glucose monitor.
Okay.
So, pretty simple, something that lots of people have made. But
very easy technology too.
Mm-hmm. And so after this, she decided to go on to another venture. And so she wanted a new technology. She remembered how her uncle was diagnosed with skin cancer when she was younger. And her uncle's skin cancer turned into brain cancer. And he ended up passing away. And that really impacted her and all that. And her new technology that she wanted to create was called the Edison. So people don't get blood tests too often. So she believed that if they got them regularly, Theranos could try and catch things earlier on and perhaps prevent them. And this would create a form of personalized medicine so that each person could, understand what's going on in their body. So she wanted to create a technology where a patient would prick their finger to draw a small sample of blood and place it on a cartridge that looked like a thick credit card. And then the cartridge would go into a bigger machine that was called the reader or the Edison. That it was a box. And pumps inside of the reader would push the blood through tiny channels in the cartridge and into little wells with proteins known as antibodies. On its way to the wells, a filter would separate the blood's solid elements such as red blood cells, white blood cells, and leave it with only the plasma. And so the plasma would be the only thing that got through. And when the plasma would come into contact with the antibodies, a chemical reaction would occur and produce a signal that would be read by the reader and translated into a result.
Okay.
So complicated.
But also, that's what I was talking about with the patch, why it doesn't work, because that's just what they do for blood testing.
Exactly.
They do it all manually by hand, so this is cool that she invented a machine to do it.
Yes, and that's exactly what she later on says.
Okay.
She wants to put the lab into a box.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, she wants to do that. And again, it's exactly the same steps that a lab technician would do. Mm-hmm. So she just wants to automate that. And so Theranos wanted to use their blood testing system to monitor patients' reaction to new drugs. And they also hoped that the readers would be placed into patients' homes. And all they would have to do is prick their finger, put their blood on a drop or two of blood onto the cartridge. And then the results would be presented on the reader. And that way, patients wouldn't have to go through the time, energy, and risks of clinical testing.
Yeah.
And they would not only saved themselves money, but pharmaceutical companies would be saved a lot of money. Because at the time, the lab industry was dominated by Quest and LabCorp. And those are still really, really big companies in the medical world. And they controlled about 80% of the market at the time. So, you know.
I'm surprised they still don't.
I didn't check if they still do, but I wouldn't be surprised. That's like...
I'm pretty sure the only one we've even seen in town is like 7 LabCorps.
Yeah. I think I have done like drug tests and stuff at Quest and things like that.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anything else. But yeah, but because of that, the blood testing prices went really high. And so these 2 companies were actually being sued by Medicare and Medicaid because they were overcharging these 2 insurance companies. But for billions of dollars, like not just like a little bit, like, yeah. But that's where Theranos would come in.
Okay.
And they would cut down costs exponentially for everyone. And Theranos also wanted the Edison to be able to do over 200 blood tests. So that ranges from STDs, herpes, to certain types of cancers, just by pricking your finger, which would be really cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Instead of having to have a whole little vial of your blood taken from you.
Yeah,
after having to waste time to go to the lab company.
And the results take very long to be able to do that many tests and yeah, money, like she said. And so because of this, she wanted the Edison to be a small box that patients kept in their homes, just like like everyone else, and they would be able to be available to them. The results would be available to them immediately, but also there would be an antenna on the reader that could send the results into the patient's physician, and they would be able to quickly make adjustments to medications. So it would just save time for everyone involved. And resources. So she wanted the machine to be the iPod of healthcare. She wanted her system to be in every household, just like Apple had their products in every household and still do. And Holmes envisioned building a disease map of each person through Theranos' blood tests. She believed that the company would then be able to reverse engineer illnesses like cancer with mathematical models and would be able to crunch data to predict the evolution of tumors.
Okay.
So it's just like such a great idea.
Yeah.
And for such a good cause. And like you were saying, a big selling point is that all you need is a drop or 2 of blood. You don't need vials and vials of blood. You don't need needles. All you need to do is like prick your finger, just like, like a glucose monitor. That's all you have to do. And she stated lab testing hasn't changed in the past 50 years because we still need tubes and tubes of blood. So she hoped to put the lab in a box, and the box would be called the Edison, and automating what chemists do in the labs. So the reason she named it the Edison was because of Thomas Edison's famous quote that states they assumed that they would have to fail 10,000 times to be able to get it to work the 10,000th and first. So she understood that it was going to be a hard project.
Yeah, that's like some intense dreams right there, to be able to just rip away that whole piece of healthcare.
Yeah, and also lots of jobs. Like thinking about it, like that's a lot of people that would be no longer needed. Oof, which sucks. But yeah, So in 2006, Elizabeth had an interview with Edmund Koo. At the time, there was a painkiller that was called Celebrev, and it was being scrutinized because it was thought to increase the risks of stroke and heart attacks.
Okay.
And she stated that with Theranos, patients could keep taking the drug while eliminating the risks involved. She stated that Theranos would be able to eliminate all those deaths. It would quite literally save lives, is what she said. And her mantra for her technology became a world in which no one ever has to say goodbye too soon.
Very cute.
I know. I know. It's such a good idea. And so her company blows up. Mm-hmm. She is a young female college dropout that has a goal to change the world and save lives doing it. Like, this is what, like, I don't know, I dreamed of it. It'd be such a great idea. And she even had a quote on her desk that was made about her that said, you start to realize that you're looking into the eyes of another Bill Gates or Steve Jobs.
Oh.
So it's like, just so much potential there. It's so cool.
It is cool, but at the same time, I know that this is supposed to blow up at some point, so I think I'm more excited for where this goes downhill.
I was hoping, I kind of wanted to not tell you that it was going to blow up. I was like, maybe I should just crash their hopes, just in the middle of it. Like, but, you know, maybe it crashes in a different way.
Sorry, there's a reason you've never heard of this technology.
Yeah, true. Yeah, but, yeah, so she, wants to start getting the product up and running, and so she surrounds herself with the best of the best. So I'm just going to go down a list of the people that ended up working for this company. And so Tim Kemp, he was a former IBM executive for 30 years, and he was in charge of bioinformatics at Theranos.
Okay.
Henry Mosley got his start at Intel and ran 4 different tech finance companies and was the chief financial officer at Theranos. Donald L. Lucas was a board chairman but started as a venture capitalist who helped start up the Oracle Corporation. Channing Robertson became a board member, her Stanford professor. Diane Parks was chief commercial officer, but she had originally worked for pharmaceutical and biotech companies, so she had more of the science standpoint. John Howard became the senior vice president for products and had formerly worked at Panasonic. Anna Areola became part of the team as a chief design architect, and she helped design the iPhone, and she left 15,000 shares in Apple to join this company, which, oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Putting all your faith in startups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, yeah, and then Avi Tavanian? Yes, Avi Tavanian. He was Steve Jobs' right-hand man, pretty much, and he joined the board at Theranos as well. And the board of directors was also very impressive. They were General James Mattis, he was a former Marine Corps general, Henry Kissinger and George Shultz, who were both former Secretary of States. Bill Frist was a former Senator of Tennessee. Samuel Nunn was a former Senator of Georgia. Gary Ruffin was the former Chief of Naval Operations. And William Perry was the former Secretary of Defense. So she made friends with very, very important people and very impressive people as well.
And very random, kind of, across
Mm-hmm.
who it was.
I'll talk about that a little more eventually, because she has rhyme and reason for things. she also had a very, very wealthy COO on her side. His name was Sunny Balwani, and he gave the company a $13 million loan. But he was known to be quite a hothead, pretty ruthless. And he was involved in everything. If Elizabeth was there, he was there, which kind of makes sense for a COO, I guess. But he seemed to be a bit more overbearing than others had seen. And later, it was found out that Sunny, who was 49 at the time, had been dating Elizabeth, who was 30 at the time. Yeah, so a little secrecy there. And so by 2005, the 21-year-old, she had raised $6 million for her company, which is like, I'm 21. What do you mean? She started her company when she was 19.
Wow.
I know. I'm like, what am I doing? It makes me feel
Isn't
like
that like
such
the
a
same
waste.
thing though, like with Bill Gates and Steve Jobs?
Yes.
No, I guess they were in their 30s.
Yeah, they were older, I believe, but still, like, not old.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I can't see myself in, like, 10 years also making a corporation, but, like, that's just me.
And I'm like, I need to dream bigger, I think.
Right? I'm like,
I'm kind of settling.
This is cool, I guess. I guess I should do more. I don't know. But yeah. Yeah, she had raised $6 million for her company, and having all those people on her team made investors just more reassured that this was going to be a revolutionary company. Like, with that many people on your side, yeah, you have to be very impressive of a person. And so, as I have alluded to before, she had looked up to Steve Jobs and Apple a lot. So she created an image for herself. She only wore black turtlenecks. She wore all black all the time, you know, just like Steve Jobs. She claimed, I read it in her interview, she was like, I've been doing that since I was 6 years old. And I'm like, what kind of 6-year-old only wears black turtlenecks? I don't even think I knew what a turtleneck was. I didn't know what they were called at that point.
I'm like thinking about high school, and I'm like, man, can you imagine walking down the halls and you're like, dude, like, does that girl wear the same shirt every day?
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, she would have gotten so bullied at that point. Yeah. But anyways, she did. Which, kind of weird. She also spoke in a very, very low voice.
Sexy.
Which, right? It's like, the people said that, like, it commanded, like, respect. From how she put it.
I guess so.
And people also talked... If you ever look up pictures about her, you'll see.
Look now. What's her name again?
Elizabeth Holmes. They also talk about her unblinking blue eyes. You'll see her eyes are huge in every picture. She's always like staring really hard. And people would say, like, I look at pictures of her and I'm like, oh, creepy. But like, people would say that it would make them feel like, oh, I have all her attention. I'm so important. And I'm like, I'd be freaked out. But yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And she lived a very minimal lifestyle. She was always in the office, eating all her meals at work. She slept only 4 hours a day. And so this made her seem like the dedicated CEO everyone would want to follow, you know, like a very, very hard worker. So now we're going to talk about the machine and the process of getting it to actually work. Okay. So Edmund Koo was asked to take over engineering at the startup. The man that was interviewing her before. And he was the person that had to turn her vision into a reality. He and another team of engineers competed to make the Edison happen. And so the other group included Tony Nugent.
Love it.
Nugget, whatever. And he became the vice president of research and development. He had worked for Logitech for 11 years, and that's a company that makes computer accessories. And Colistech, I believe is how you say it. It's a company that ran cholesterol and blood tests.
Okay.
So he kind of knew what was.
He was in that realm.
Yes, exactly. And so he also worked alongside Dave Nelson. So at this point, it's a very big project. So these two decided that they didn't want to waste time creating like every single piece to get it started. And so they decided to buy a $3,000 glue dispensing robot from a company named Finsar. And this robot became the heart of the Theranos system. It was pretty much the shell that people worked on. It had like a little like lever inside of it. It just like, it was pretty much like what they needed inside.
Okay.
So yeah. And it became the heart of the Theranos system, and immediately they started having problems.
Well,
each cartridge that you put your blood on cost about $200 to make, and it could only be used once. On top of that, the very small amount of blood that they were allowed to work on made test results really hard to get. A drop or two of blood is very hard, especially if you're trying to run 200 plus tests on this one itty bitty amount of blood. Like, there's just not enough to go around. And so they also couldn't regulate temperature very well. The machine would overheat a lot. They couldn't reliably transfer fluids, which is very, very important with all this. There were constant design changes. Elizabeth had said it has to be this big, like it cannot be bigger, and you just can't put that many moving parts in a little box that big. You know, mm-hmm. it looked like one of those old computer routers. Like, it looked that size, and it was just hard to be able to get all that in there. They only got results, which meant that it would give out the correct signal when put under certain circumstances, mm-hmm. But it wasn't ready for consumer use. Right. Like, it when a chemist would say, okay, this needs to like signal this, it would work, but it wouldn't work every time. And so also, if you didn't collect the sample correctly, the results would be wildly wrong. So like, if you do anything wrong, like outside of the box, like it's over. you're going to not be able to get any results correctly. And also, it's not cleanly or safe at all. Blood would spill and drip everywhere. It would, the machine would freeze up. And so employees would have to reach into the machine. And the machine contains needles and things like that. And random test subjects' blood, which gave a lot of opportunity for infected blood to be in there. So these employees would have to put their hand into this blood box and hope that they don't get infected with these patients' blood.
Good times.
Yeah. And so it would also spill into the bottom of the machine and evaporate into the air of the room. Pieces of the device would fall off during testing, and centrifuges would explode inside of it. So it's just a very not reliable product.
Interesting.
Yeah. And some may wonder, how were they operating under all these circumstances? Like, how did they convince investors and employees to join this when all of these problems are happening? And how they did it was when investors would come in, they would test on them. You know, they would try to impress them by being like, here are the live results. And so they would take their blood, and executives would show them a tour around the building, or they would take them to lunch or something like that. And then another employee would come in to where they got their blood taken. They would take the blood sample and run an ordinary blood test on it, just in a lab, like you would with an actual blood test. And then they would come back, they would put the results on the Edison and be like, here it is.
Wow.
It did it. But yeah, it definitely did not. And yeah, it gave the illusion of it working in real time when it absolutely did not. So you definitely still needed chemists for all this.
That is quite the scam for that to be able to work. You'd think they'd want to
You stay in the room that whole time.
figure out, yeah.
Yeah, at least I would. But when asked how the machine worked, she would give really, really vague answers. And when told that her answers are really vague and like elementary for how smart she seems to be, she would say that, well, it's a startup. I need to keep things under wraps. Like I can't give all my information out when I'm still developing this. And so it does make sense. But in her own words, on how the machine worked, she stated, "A chemistry is performed so that a chemical reaction occurs and generates a signal from the chemical interaction with the sample, which is translated into a result, which is then reviewed and certified by a certified laboratory personnel."
Yeah, it sounds like what I did in high school.
I know. Okay, I was gonna say, it sounds like remember when you would have to write lab reports in chemistry?
Yeah.
That sounds exactly what I would just chemistry and results and technology.
We mixed 1 and 2 together, and it made a chemical reaction because they're chemicals that react with each other. Like trying to get that word count. Like,
Exactly. It sounds like a high schooler wrote it, and whatever. For how smart she's supposed to be, it's like, what are you doing? But yeah, and when criticism would be brought up by fellow employees, executives would tell them, oh, well, maybe you're not a Silicon Valley type of person. They would be told like, oh, well, you should work for like a smaller startup, somewhere like that isn't trying to change the world, because you're not that type of person. And it's like, how do you not listen to your employees that are physically working so hard to be able to do this for you? Like,
I would quit so fast.
Yeah,
I'd be out of there.
And we talk about that later. Well, actually, now turnover was very, very high. Very high, obviously.
I bet.
And they also put it in a different way, is that they talked about it like in 2 different worlds, that the carpeted world and the tile world. And the carpeted world, Elizabeth was like this revolutionary person. She could not be touched. She was the next Steve Jobs, the next Bill Gates. She was a revolutionary and someone to be looked up to. And in the tile world, you would get the engineers and the chemists that are like, nothing is working, everything's falling apart, we're getting infected, like blood is everywhere. They would see the physical evidence that nothing is working, but those 2 worlds were kept very apart. They didn't communicate with one another.
That's insane.
At all. But yeah, you can imagine that this frustration and pressure to do all this, to make Elizabeth's vision into a reality, would translate into the workplace, and it absolutely did. So in 2014, the company had 800 employees. And since its start in 2003, like I said, employee turnover was very high. And that wasn't exclusive just a regular employee. It was also executives, very impressive executives that would come and go.
Weird.
Yeah, so, and they would never talk about them a lot. They would, like, someone would be there one day and then the next, no one talked about them. So yeah.
I wonder if it was because they were trying to do something so amazing, where it's like, we still believe in this. Because I'm like, this would have fallen apart if this was literally anything else.
That's the thing, is like a lot of people, the reason that they wanted to do this was because
you want it to work.
It's such a good idea. Like, if you could do something like this to be able to help the medical world in such a profound way, like, it would make things so much better. And it is for the greater good. It's for patients to be able to be allowed to see their own result, because some places you're not allowed to have your own results. You would be able to get real-time results as well. You wouldn't have to wait weeks on end, and you could make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's something that people really wanted to work.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, things just could not get done. And so Elizabeth wanted the engineering department to work 24/7. And even if they made a schedule like she was suggesting, it just was not possible with the amount of employees there. And this pressure to work harder and longer hours wasn't just on the engineering and chemistry departments, it was on everyone. It was like very subtle ways to try and incentivize longer and hours. She would order dinner for the office every night, which is like super, super nice.
Yeah.
I would love that. But she also made sure that it would arrive around 8 or 8:30 p.m. And then if you wanted to stay for the dinner, to wrap things up, to clean up and everything, you pretty much ended up leaving around 10 at night. And so it was very, very long work hours. And yeah, like I said, it's just like, it's little things to incentivize you wanting to stay. And it sounds like a nice thing, because it's like, oh, my boss buys us dinner. It's good dinner and everything, but it's like sneaky in a way. But, okay, so one pivotal moment that changed the atmosphere of the company was when a man named Michael O'Connell, he worked on making the cartridge. And so he wanted to make a company of his own with kind of similar technology, but it would instead be used in a veterinary's office, so on animals instead of humans. And so the information got leaked that he wanted to do this, and obviously not very good. And so executives went wild. Employees stated there was a huge company meeting. Elizabeth was livid, and she was ready with a bunch of the best lawyers around. And they announced that there was going to be an FBI investigation in order to find out if there were any more employees leaking information. Yeah, and so Elizabeth became very, very paranoid after this. And I didn't include it in here, but the FBI investigation and all those senators that are a part of the board, and all those military members that had invested, they had, when Elizabeth was asked if she was wanting to work in military operations, she'd be like very hush-hush about it. She'd be like, I can't talk about that on the record and stuff like that. So it made it be like, okay, so she's probably going to try to work with the military. And a couple journalists believed that the military wanted to have some Edisons like out on the battlefield and have them test soldiers like right there, real time, things like that. And so
all I'm thinking of is like people in Civil War uniforms running around with huge like bayonet. guns, and like one guy is running in the background with like this box, like just like a black box, and he's like running through like the cannons and like.
And like it just be like, I just need to prick your finger. It's fine. Like, I know you have a gunshot wound, but let me just
confirmed. He's dead. He's down.
He does have lead poisoning from this bullet. Yeah. So.
Can you get lead poisoning from a bullet?
I mean, at that point, probably at Civil War, yeah, probably. I don't think now. Maybe
are they made of lead?
No. I want to know.
Oh yeah, they are, because you know, like those like morbid jokes where it's like you're gonna get a face full of lead.
Oh yeah. Okay, so it's like they're made of many materials. Lead is a common one. But also they have copper, gilding metal, and an alloy of copper and zinc.
All right.
So watch out. Don't get lead poisoning. Buy bullets.
If you don't die first.
Yeah, I'm like, but yeah. Yeah, military stuff that might have been in the works. And so, after this incident with the leaked information, many contracts were signed by employees stating that under no circumstance can you talk about company information. If you leak anything, you will be sued, blah, 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 all that. Which, like, it's pretty normal for most companies. But around the office, it even started to feel paranoid. The space itself wasn't really organized to be able to work with other people. It was very, like, cubicle type, like, this is your space, you will be in it. And people felt like a little secluded from one another. Security was always outside of Elizabeth's office. Bulletproof glass was installed in her windows, which, like, I don't know. Bodyguards were everywhere, and this paranoia only increased over time. So, wow. Yeah,
that's pretty intense for someone who has technology that doesn't work.
Yeah, she's like actually crazy. Like, yeah, but whatever. Another thing that was really strange was that communication was very, very hard to do within the company. Departments were kept separate from one another, and this only made it harder to get the Edison up and running. Yeah. Obviously. like when an engineer would be working on the system, and they don't know anything about chemistry, and they're trying to figure out why certain things are working or how certain things should work, they can't talk to, like, the chemistry department about it. They weren't allowed. Elizabeth was the only one with, like, the full information. No employees, even the people that were working on the Edison itself, they couldn't communicate with one another. And this went in all ways. Like, every single employee, it was made by IT that departments could not message one another. Mm-hmm. IT was told to do this. And employees would also, they would email people, and they wouldn't email Elizabeth or Sunny. They would just, like, be emailing a coworker, but Sunny would, like, answer that email or stuff like that. And so that's when people were like, I'm being watched, like, on everything I do. At one point, an employee that used a USB got fired. Like, any form of
That's pretty fair, though.
Yeah, I suppose, but...
Like, I'm trying to think of a reason why you'd need one, but I can't come up with one.
Yeah. But I do think it's strange, the email thing. Like, I'd be so spooked if I, like, texted a coworker and my boss answered me back. Like, not even my boss, like, my boss's 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 boss. Like,
you get a text message and then the doorbell rings.
Exactly. Pretty much, but this went for every single employee. Receptionists were being keystroked, which means they were being internally monitored. And it's like, if a receptionist, which doesn't know anything about the company, is being keystroked, what do you think like these engineers and these chemists and things like that are being looked at? Are they being monitored at all times? Like, Jesus. But
that's also a lot of money to invest to watch people.
Well, you'd need like a whole IT department just to
for
look
security.
through emails.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's it. But yeah, they were not allowed to even talk to their families about what they did, and at this point, it ended up being even coworkers were even paranoid of one another, for really no good reason, you know.
Which is not a good work environment.
Exactly. But yeah, and so at this point, despite all this going on in the inside, the world is head over heels about Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes. And at this point, they were testing on 3rd and 4th stage cancer patients.
Oh.
And not only was that like morally incorrect, the technology was still not working. So it was almost like they were being invasive towards these patients for no reason.
Why would you start with blood too? Like such a risky pathogen to be like starting with, instead of
gotta dream big.
doing like like easier chemicals to work with to get the technology working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That should be like stage 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but either way, she still looked very good in the world. And so in 2009, Walgreens signed a $140 million deal that would allow Theranos to put wellness centers in their stores, and they would put up the Edisons for consumer use.
Go get your blood pressure tested. Go get your blood tested.
Blood test. Exactly. It was perfect, you know? They would be able to run all these tests at a Walgreens, just like 5 minutes from your house.
And then you could like get your prescription.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It was perfect. But at this point, they still didn't have a working model. So they were really, really feeling the pressure after they signed this deal, because Walgreens obviously needed it. And in 2013, Theranos tested on the public with the Walgreens partnership in Arizona. So the Edison was still not approved for in-store testing, but Theranos was running out of money. So Elizabeth somehow convinced Walgreens on the idea that doing the wellness center, but without the Edisons, they wouldn't need them yet. They would get the blood samples with a needle and syringe, just like everywhere else. They would get a tube of blood, and then send it to them in Theranos, to Theranos in Palo Alto. And that is where a lab was hastily made, and inexperienced employees would run blood tests in a lab, like random, inexperienced techs. And so Walgreens didn't know that they weren't testing the Edisons. They were running these blood tests the old-fashioned way, just like Quest and LabCorp, like just with chemists doing the tests. They were very unequipped for this testing. One lab director quit and was replaced by a dermatologist.
Okay.
Very, very different fields.
Different kind of doctor, but okay.
Skin lab setting, like clinical. but yeah. And actually, in many states, it's patients aren't allowed to do their own lab tests without a prescription. They need to see a doctor first. And so Elizabeth lobbied the idea to the state of Arizona to pass a law allowing patients to order their own lab tests without needing a doctor's consult. So she literally changed laws for her company to continue to lie to the public. Like, isn't that crazy?
It is, but I also want to say that that's awesome, and it's not. It's horrible. It's like,
well, it's
that's
just
amazing. Like,
it's impressive how good she is
yeah,
at convincing people. She's a hell of a marketer. Like, if she only did business, she would be so incredibly good at it. But
and that's what I was thinking earlier. I'm like, you don't make money scamming people. You make money off of business.
Exactly. Yeah, but
that's insane.
She got a lot done.
Yeah.
And if you look at the trial that she did, these officials, these lawmakers, they were so impressed by her. They were like, well, without a doubt, you're going to do great things. Like, that's one of the lines pretty much that one of the lawmakers said, and it's like, ooh, if you would know.
Yeah.
But yeah. So because of this deal with Walgreens, like you said, super convenient, she got even more investors. And so this included families like the Walmart family, who invested $150 million. A media mogul named Rupert Murdoch, he invested $125 million.
Hold on. Did you just say that Walmart is a family name?
Yes.
Today I learned.
I think it's or like
the Walmart family, or is that just like a company?
No, it's like the
like someone's name is David Walmart. I don't know why that stuck out to me. I'm sorry.
No. Like I also the Walton. That's their name. Walton.
Okay.
So not quite.
I was like, Walmart.
Yeah, but and then the DeVos family, such as Betsy DeVos, invested $100 million. I kept finding like conflicting reports on how much the company was worth at its highest point. But the highest number I found was that the company was valued at $9 billion. So even if it's like half of that, that's crazy.
And that's not even like making any profit off of anything. That's just solely investors.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Can we talk about how much money people have to be able to put all of that into one company?
It's like ridiculous that like that Rupert Murdoch guy, he himself, just one guy, $125 million to be able to invest in a company.
I mean, I guess if you have billions, what else are you going to do with it? Invest into a company that's supposedly going to be incredible.
We gotta kill the rich is what I'm saying.
Moral
Redistribute that wealth. Yeah, but the world was still fooled by this company, and that it was still making things happen, making change happen, and they had the best people making advertisements for them. They even ended up making gift cards and vouchers to be able to give to your family, and there was like a commercial that was like, there's nothing more important than your health. Give your mother a gift card so she knows about her health and blah blah blah. And it's like, that's so manipulative. Like,
How is that even legal?
I don't know. But yeah. So the science is just not there. One of the biggest pitfalls in the company was that when like it started getting shut down is when they started seeing results that didn't match with other labs' results. So they would give the patient wrong information, wrong results, and obviously when it comes to people's health, like things can go south really fast, and people didn't know what diseases they did or did not have and things like that, so they were just being completely misled.
I'm trying to figure out what could have gone wrong, like where the technology's not at, but I'm wondering, I think it's after it's tested, how does the thing know to let you know what the answer is?
Well, like, I think there's so many components, too, because, like, first, they need a lot more blood.
Mm-hmm.
Like, also...
But then it's like, if you have either disease A or disease B, and then you add, like, this chemical to it, and then it does this kind of reaction, you have to see that with your eyes to diagnose it.
Exactly.
So, like, is that where it was? Like, the machine just, like... doesn't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's also another thing. Like, a physician was talking about it, and they're like, we don't diagnose patients by just a test result. We diagnose them as a whole. We have to look at so many parts. Like, a blood result isn't the only thing that people are like, oh, you have cancer.
It's not going to tell me that I have depression.
That's another thing. Like there's so many things that these blood tests just
couldn't do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It could only test for blood diseases anyway.
Exactly. And yeah, so they did not have any FDA approval. But they did not yet conduct a thorough search of the company. But they did have, like, I forget exactly what they're called, like the CMA or something. They're like another form of, like, kind of like an FDA but smaller, but they had done like a search of the company, but Elizabeth, there were like multiple floors in the building, and they only showed them like half of them, or like there would be 2 floors, and they would like the basement would be where all the lab stuff is and like all the Edison stuff is, and the top floor would be the results that these labs were giving, not the Edison. And they would be like, oh, well, this is right, so it should be fine. But yeah, they hid away a whole part of their company from these people.
Wow.
Yeah, so because of this, they were allowed to run normally. And physicians would call Theranos and ask about blood work for their patients that they were getting done. And they were not very transparent. They said that, like, questions that any other blood company would be able to answer, they couldn't. They would be very vague. And they weren't getting any information on how they're running these blood tests, which is, like, very important. And the results are coming in wrong. So that's where it starts affecting.
Crumbling.
Yeah. So this is where we start talking about employees and what became of them because of the working for Theranos. So one man in particular was named Ian Gibbons. He was an expert in blood testing, so exactly what they needed. He was a Cambridge PhD, a very, very smart man. Employees at Theranos looked up to him because he was the one teaching them how to do everything. He knew all there is to know about blood. And he actually was the one that wrote most of the patents for Theranos, and Elizabeth would attach her name to them. So, in early 2013, Theranos tried to prevent Ian from having to testify in a patent lawsuit. If he were to give evidence that Elizabeth wasn't the inventor, some of the company's patents would be invalidated. And so, as the deposition approached, he drank heavily and fell into a depression. And when he asked whether or not he would be fired because of this case, he was told yes. And because of it, he committed suicide that night. So it really, really affected people.
That's kind of awful. This ruined lives.
Yes, it really has. it has.
And what year was this?
This was 2013.
Okay, so this all was in the same year. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And they also said that no one ever spoke about it again. It was just like nothing happened.
Jeez.
Yeah, which is ridiculous. But yeah, so even when employees left, they were being monitored. They were threatened to be sued if they disclosed anything with journalists and things like that. And so a lab director that had left Theranos on bad terms, and he was very concerned about the practices that were being done at Theranos. And so when he left, he was hounded by lawyers saying that if he says anything at all, he's going to get sued. And these are like some of the best lawyers in America. So obviously he was really, really scared. And so he still decided to speak to journalists because he didn't think it was right, as long as his identity remained hidden. And so the lab director revealed that the Edison could only run a few tests, and the 250 that were said to be offered were done the old-fashioned way. No new technology is being used, which is like the big one. Mm-hmm. So at this point, the journalist, he worked for Wall Street Journal. He did an in-depth article on the company, and when the story broke, all hell broke loose. The article exposed everything that I've talked about. It was going on, everything that was going on in the company, the lies that had been told to everyone. And so in response to this, Elizabeth and Sunny spoke to various sources saying, oh, none of this is true. The reporting is false. They don't know what they're talking about. They are just trying to take down a company that's trying to do good. Like things like that. And so they threatened the Wall Street Journal with litigation. But it was too late. The FDA did a thorough search on the company and banned the use of the nanotainer, which is the container that the blood would be put into. So that was banned, and they revoked the lab's license to operate. Nice. So that's it's done. By 2017, Theranos had spent almost all of its $900 million that it had raised, and nearly $300 million was spent on legal fees and refunding every patient in Arizona, which at the very least they did that. Thankfully.
I'm just glad they didn't actually use those machines on people, because I'm thinking of all these people who just in the public have used it, and it's like, thank goodness this was just a regular blood test. Like,
yeah, that's the thing.
Instead of a death box.
Mm-hmm, some people, there were obviously like some tests that were done on the box, but like, yeah, thankfully it wasn't ever like given to just the consumer. But in 2018, Theranos dissolved. Elizabeth and Sunny were charged with conspiracy and fraud. They pleaded not guilty. So, today, Holmes and her former COO, Ramesh, or Sunny, Balwani, pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and 9 counts of wire fraud. They were each released on $500,000 of bail and ordered to surrender their passports. Trial is set to July 28th of 2020 and face up to 20 years of prison.
Wow, so not even yet.
No.
This is still happening.
Yeah,
I can't believe I never knew about this. This is insane.
It's still happening. And 20 years. Can you believe that?
That's insane.
I forgot to look it up, but like anything medically is just such a big deal. Like HIPAA. Have you heard of? Yeah, it's like patient privacy, things like that.
Right.
That stuff is like a huge deal. So the fact that these people were taking people's blood, giving them back fake results, I can't believe that they are only getting 20 years at most if they don't get off.
Weird. And you know they will.
Yeah, they're rich.
Money.
They're rich, and not only that, they gosh, I forgot what I was gonna say. Yeah, 20 years in prison. But the one good thing that hopefully will make things better is that it's the U.S. versus Elizabeth and Sonny, so it's like all the way to the top. Mm-hmm. So at least they'll be charged with something.
Yeah.
So yeah, she currently lives in luxury apartments in San Francisco.
Good times.
Yep. And
that's a faraway trial.
She ruined people's lives. Yeah, and like the fact that in 2018 this all happened, like I wonder what they've been doing to push it off. And people need to know about this. Get mad about this. like make them do their time. That's ridiculous. Like their company ended making someone commit suicide. They've ruined lives.
I'm wondering how many people too got bad lab results back, and
that's the thing.
Something bad happened.
They were saying that only like if they were testing for syphilis, let's say 100 people were being tested for syphilis, they kind of like ballparked it. They were like, this many people should have it in 100. And so they would call like these random people and be like, you have it. And then like these random people like would or wouldn't. And it's like,
I hope they got sent in to do like a normal lab test afterwards.
Yeah.
They probably had to go to a real doctor after.
Exactly. Which is like,
That's
again,
good.
when things fell apart. Like, I don't understand how they thought that this would continue. It makes me think that, like, she's actually crazy. Like a lot of these executives were a little crazy.
I'm wondering if she was just hoping that, like, it would be there. Like, hoping that she could pull her way out of this if it ended up working someday.
Sure, but, like, give your employees, like, working conditions so that it could work, which is the thing. Another thing that I've thought about, I'm like, what if all these people did work under the correct conditions? What if they took like a tube of blood? What if they made the machine bigger? Would that have been able to work? Because these people are like brilliant people. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that they would have been able to come up with something, but instead it just like it fell apart.
Or even something different. Like, I'm even just thinking, like, automating.
Is anything.
Anything, and then still just showing you what are the results, and then you can have a chemist from there do something with it. Something.
Mm-hmm. I, like, with all these people on board, you'd think that they would have done something great if they were under the right conditions. Which is so sad.
So awful.
Yeah. But I also wanted to talk about my sources. I wanted to leave them at the end because I wanted you to like not know things were going to go bad, but oh well. So I got some information from an Esquire article. I watched the ABC 2020 documentary, the HBO documentary named The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley. And this book, I read Bad Blood, Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup by John Carreyrou. And he did such incredible work. I believe he's the man that leaked the Wall Street Journal, that wrote the Wall Street Journal article to stop this company. And yeah, he did incredible work. I pulled some when I talked about how the machine worked, I pulled that straight out of his book because I would not be able to tell you how it worked. It was very complicated to be able to figure out everything. But yeah, there's a lot of really good information, and if you want to know any more about it, please read his book. That is Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes.
That's insane. I'm excited to follow this.
I know. I'm like, I did so much research, and it's still not done.
And it started so long ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy, but
yeah.
No one even probably thought something was going wrong, because that's just how long testing takes.
Exactly, especially like medical wise.
Yeah, like it just takes 20 years. Can you imagine if they had actually done it right, and then we would be here today?
She's like, and that's the sucky thing. She was such an inspiration to women, mm-hmm. especially in science. Not only science, but technology and engineering, which is a place where women aren't really big in any, like, at all. And
business, being her own CEO.
Yes. In Silicon Valley, she was a dropout.
Insane. Like all the rest of them.
Yeah. It's like, she would have been such an inspiration if it actually worked, but like instead it's like, oh yeah, women can't do it, and it's like, just because she can't, like, which is so shitty. She knew
you ruined it
her
for
way
all
around,
of us.
right? But like you said, it's really impressive how she was able to get all these people on her side. Like, you have to be an impressive individual to be able to be like, yes, Apple people, come work for me. Like, let me be your boss. And yes, government officials, do this for me. Like, you have to be some type of talker. Thank you so much for listening to the Eerie Theories podcast.
If you want to hear more of us, go ahead and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Also, give us a follow on Twitter at Eerie_theory, and let us know what topics you'd like to hear on our show.
We'll see you next time on Eerie Theories.